The thing that motivated my wife and I is that as we read the scripture, we saw that God had commanded us to raise our children. And I wanted to raise them in a way that they would be honoring God, that I would be able to teach them about God. And as I looked at what was being taught in the public school system, since I was actually teaching in the private schools, very familiar with the educational environment, I realized that I didn't want to have to constantly battle with my own children as to what they were learning every single day, especially when it comes to secular humanism, when it comes to atheistic worldviews, when it comes to Darwinian biological evolution. It would be much easier if I could simply teach them the truth straight up, first off, and then learn how to answer the objections to Christianity and learn how to answer the competing worldviews at a later date.
We can and ought to be teaching the reign and the sovereignty of Jesus Christ and the crown rights of Jesus Christ over all aspects of academia. So that when we teach our children math, we ought to be teaching them that 2 + 3 = 5, because it's God's 2 plus God's 3 and it equals God's 5. God is all over academics. And the only way we're going to be able to teach our children the biblical view of education is to teach them at home.
Make sure that everything is integrated with a biblical worldview, because if it isn't, it's going to have the same results, it's going to have the same weakness as the secular humanistic curriculum that has failed our public school systems.
You know, we're trying in public education today, we're trying to educate students in what we say is a valueless society. You know, everything is so neutral. We're all about tolerance and neutrality. Yeah, there's no such thing as a value-neutral society. You know, either good is good and truth is true, or it's not. And so what has happened is that we have taken the teeth out of education when we take values out. So when we give the parents the authority, teach your principles, whatever your principles are, and maybe your principles don't exactly line up with mine, but at least then my children know what we believe and they have a more secure background.
Well, in the public school, they have a very difficult time in teaching any kind of values or character, because values have a basis. And most of our values in the Western world, the Western culture that we live in, are based on a Judeo-Christian value, the 10 Commandments. And when we look at our founding laws, we look at the emblems on our Supreme Court building, we find out that this is what our legal system, our value system, our ethical system are all based on. And because of the climate in the secular world today, public schools can't do that. They simply can't come out and say, this is the way that we should act, because the first question that comes up is, why?
Yes, we want them to be open-minded to see another view, but we don't want them to be so easily swayed. And we see that. That's the foundation of home education. It gives us time to teach what we feel is important.
When it comes to the idea of a homogeneous society, this is the kind of thing that was introduced into society late 1800s, early 1900s, this educational philosophy to build a homogeneous unit. When you actually look at the early foundation of this country, we had so many different people groups that literally blended with each other, but they did it in a natural setting. They did it by coming in, going to work, learning to speak the same language, and this type of thing. Today, in our multicultural establishment, we are going to teach kids according to their own language, not even requiring them to learn English. So they're trying to, on one hand, to provide a homogeneous culture, and on the other hand, preventing it from happening by encouraging a multiculturalism.
We are at a momentous period in history. It's kind of like it's where all the marbles, or all the chips have been pushed in the middle of the table. And if you recognize that, if you are a believer in liberty and limited government and free markets, then I believe you have really an obligation to be involved. And it starts with very basic things at home of making sure your kids are educated and knowledgeable, but it is also a time and an opportunity and an obligation where you need to be involved. And it's not something where you can say, you know, gee, the world's a messy place. I'm going to live an isolated life and take care of those in my immediate family. I think we've all been given great gifts in that we were born in this nation. And if you're aware of that fact, then I think you have an obligation to be involved and try and pass them on to the next generation.